The Malaysian English Language Teaching Association, or MELTA as it is commonly known, is Malaysia's oldest national English language teaching association. Founded in 1958, the association has grown significantly over the years. Despite its evolution from the Selangor English Language Teaching Association, as it was first known, the aspirations of the association remain anchored to what is spelled out in our Constitution. We are an association of English language teachers dedicated to advancing English language education. Towards this end, MELTA works with partners in Malaysia as well as overseas. To date, MELTA has formal partnerships with English language teaching associations in Japan, South Korea, the Philippines, Thailand, Mongolia, Indonesia, India, Brunei, Hong Kong, Bangladesh, and Taiwan. These partnerships allow MELTA to engage in continuous dialogue with other English language teaching associations, and in doing so, create opportunities for the professional development of our members on a global scale. Within Malaysia, MELTA is committed to reaching as many English teachers as possible. Towards this goal, we are represented by MELTA chapters made up of dedicated teams of English language practitioners. As a national association, the association activities are managed by several bureaus, namely bureaus for training, research and development, publications, special projects, journals, special interest groups, chapters, and technologies. The association is only as strong as its members, so we look forward to your support. Join us and let's work towards our shared vision of advancing English language education.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Bismillah walhamdulillah. Selamat datang ke Fakulti Pengajian Bahasa dan Pembangunan Insan atau ringkasnya FBI. Setelah 13 tahun kami beroperasi sebagai Pusat Pengajian Bahasa dan Pembangunan Insaniah, pada tahun 2021 usaha naik taraf sebagai fakulti telah diluluskan oleh pihak pengurusan universiti. Fakulti Pengajian Bahasa dan Pembangunan Insan buat masa sekarang menawarkan 5 program akademik dan 40 kursus umum, wajib dan elektif universiti. Untuk program-program diperingkat prasiswazah, FBI menawarkan sarjana muda komunikasi perniagaan dengan bahasa Inggeris, dan kedua sarjana muda bahasa Arab dengan keusahawanan. Manakala bagi program di peringkat pasca siswazah, kami menawarkan 3 program, iaitu yang pertama program sarjana komunikasi perniagaan dalam bentuk kerja kursus, yang kedua program sarjana sastra secara penyelidikan, dan yang ketiga program doktor falsafah juga secara penyelidikan.
Program Sarjana Muda Komunikasi Perniagaan dengan Bahasa Inggeris atau dikenali dengan BCE ditawarkan dalam 2 mod pengajian, iaitu mod kerja khusus dan mod industri.
Program Sarjana Muda Bahasa Arab dengan Keusahawanan menyediakan satu wadah unik, relevan dan berbeza kepada pelajar. Ia melengkapi pelajar dengan bidang bahasa, bidang kemahiran komunikasi dan keusahawanan. Program ini ditawarkan dalam dua mod pengajian iaitu mod kerja khusus dan mod industri 3U1I yang mana melengkapkan para pelajar dengan pembelajaran berasaskan kerja selama 1 tahun di industri.
Program Master Business Komunikasi ini ditawarkan dengan mod kerja khusus dan pelajar akan menempuh masa pengajian dalam 3 semester dan lebih kurang 42 kredit akan diselesaikan selama pengajian.
Di bawah kendalian saya adalah kursus-kursus yang berkaitan kursus wajib universiti seperti kenegaraan dan pembangunan Malaysia, seperti hubungan etnik, falsafah ilmu, falsafah dan isu-isu semasa, penghayatan dan peradaban. Selain pada itu, bidang kepakaran kami untuk ditawarkan bagi mereka-mereka yang berminat untuk mengikuti pengajian peringkat pasca siswazah. Kami mempunyai kepakaran dalam bidang sosiologi, social work ataupun kerja sosial dan juga sejarah dan juga peradaban.
Kami menawarkan 8 kursus bahasa dari tahap 1 sehingga ke tahap 4 dan kursus-kursus ini merupakan mata pelajaran wajib universiti. Penawaran kursus ini bergantung kepada keputusan muat pelajar-pelajar ya. Dan yang terbaru ialah kursus intensif bahasa Inggeris yang ditawarkan secara atas talian. Kursus ini terbuka kepada semua termasuk pelajar sekolah dan juga pelajar universiti.
Di sini kami menawarkan 8 kursus bahasa asing sebagai kursus wajib universiti. Dan di sini juga kami menawarkan tahap 1 dan tahap 2 setiap kursus bahasa asing dan juga tahap 3 kursus untuk kursus elektif bahasa asing.
Kami amat alu-alukan kebersamaan anda dengan Fakulti Pengajian Bahasa dan Pembangunan Insan.
We look forward to seeing everyone around in UMK soon, insyaAllah. So until then, take care.
Sertai kami
Fakulti Pengajian Bahasa dan Pembangunan Insan.
Fakultas Pendidikan Bahasa dan Pembangunan Manusia.
คณะศึกษาศาสตร์และการพัฒนาทั่วไปเก้งกองนินเก้งคกักกักเบอร์
语言研究与社会科学系
كلية دراسة اللغات وعلوم الإنسان.
Fakulti Pengajian Bahasa dan Pembangunan Insan.
Sertai kami di Fakulti Bahasa dan Pembangunan Insan.
Jom sertai kami sambung master dan PhD di FBI.
Sertai kami di Fakulti Pengajian Bahasa dan Pembangunan Insan.
Okay, Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. So before we begin, is my voice clear? So if my voice is clear, can you please comment right there? Just comment in the chat box if my voice is clear. All right. Okay, thank you so much for your responses. All right, so since my voice is clear, we shall begin, officially begin. So Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi ta'ala wabarakatuh. And a very good day to everyone, distinguished guests. So Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Yang berbahagia, Professor Dr. Zuraida Muhammad Dawn, distinguished guests from all corners of Malaysia and outside of Malaysia. Assalamualaikum and a very good afternoon. I bid to everyone. Welcome to today's program, Cefr-Based Assessment in English Language Education, Issues and Challenges. First and foremost, on behalf of the organizing committee, I wish to take this opportunity to extend our warmest welcome and utmost appreciation to all respective guests on all our platforms today. And I believe we have guests from all over Malaysia, all corners of Malaysia, and also outside of Malaysia. Now, in this platform today, we have significant faces, I'm sure. So, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, before we begin, I'm sure you all know our distinguished or esteemed speaker for today, but nevertheless, I would like to still provide some background about her. So Professor Dr. Zuraida Muhammad Don is currently adjunct professor from the Language Academy in University Technology Malaysia, UTM. Now, as a background, she was a professor at University Malaya till 2018, and she's currently adjunct professor at UTM and also UPSI, Malaysia. Now, throughout her career, she has held many posts within University Malaya and also at national level, including the chair of the English Language Division, head of the English Language Department in University Malaya, and also dean of the Faculty of Language and Linguistics. At national level, she has served as in many posts, for example, chair of the English Language Quality and Standards Council. And currently, ladies and gentlemen, Professor Dr. Zuraida Muhammad Don is currently chair of the Committee for the Development of the Ecosystem Model for Public Universities and chair of the Muslims Revision Committee. So she has been contributing a lot to our English education. So without further ado, I'd like to please welcome Professor Dr. Zuraida Muhammad Don.
Thank you.
Hello, Professor.
Thank you, Nurul Iman, for your introduction. Yep. Okay, I'm at the moment professor at UTM. I'm on contract actually, and I'm adjunct professor with UMK. Yeah, University Malaysia Kelantan. So thank you again. Right. Yeah, but this is to me this is rather an interesting topic, which I hope I can get. I mean, you have given me some comments and given me some what you think are challenges in CFR alignment, particularly in content assessment. So it'd be very good if we could have more discussion, at the end of the talk. That is now. Let me just. Can you see my slides? Yeah. Now, I'm not sure whether it's that, but it's okay. Now, what the aim, first of all, is the aims of this presentation are two. First one, to describe what's involved in aligning assessment to the CFR. Yeah. So I'm also going to talk about the assessment itself. What is assessment? And then relate this to the CFR. And more importantly, to highlight issues arising and the challenges to be faced when we align assessment to the CFR. Now, the target audience, as I understand, are English language instructors who need to implement effective assessment, particularly I would say an effective assessment approach aligned to the CFR in particular context and for a particular purpose, because the context is so wide that we need to identify what context we're using this and for what particular purpose. For example, if you're going to, if through this short presentation you are able to set a test to assess reading comprehension, for example, at B1 for Form 5 students or students from university. Yeah. So if you have B1 Form 5 students, they are not the same as B1 a student at university, although both groups of students may achieve B1. Yeah. So that's very important for us to make that distinction. Oh, okay. Let me just. Now, the three areas I'll cover in this presentation. The first, I'm going to talk about issues in language assessment. What are the issues that we need to understand, and we need to, in order for us to be able to align assessment to the CFR. So issues in language assessment in general, and then looking at the CFR as a framework of reference for language assessment. And the third, of course, challenges and concerns. And this, I hope, will come from you all. And then I hope I can then address these concerns and discuss these challenges with participants in this presentation, in this seminar. Let us look at issues in language assessment. Yeah, just look at that. Now, very importantly, when we talk about language assessment, there is a fundamental distinction between what we call informal assessment, which is informal assessment for learning during the course. This is what we call formative assessment, yeah. And the other one is formal assessment of learning during and at the end of the course. Usually for summative assessment, we have it at the end of the course, yeah. Because you may want to know how you can use and adapt these CFR descriptors in order to help you create or a set task to assess learning, and also to set tasks to assess students' either achievement, or performance in the course. Okay. Now let us look at, in general, what we understand by informal assessment for learning. This is what we call, when we say an assessment functions formatively, what we actually means is that we actually try to identify the learner's needs. Yeah, very important. And when we identify the learner's needs, then we ask ourselves, or we plan for what to do next in order to address address what student needs in order to improve in English. Yeah, and then from then, once you've done that, teachers can then, if you look at that one, take action. Yeah, or adjust their lesson planning to make things much easier for students, or to make things better for students. That's very important. So very importantly is that in this kind of assessment, there shouldn't be any judgment, there shouldn't be any recording of results. That's very important, because the purpose is not to test the achievement of students, but to to help students to learn. And it is for the teachers rather than for the students. So once you know what students have, through your assessment, you get some idea what students can do, what students still need to be able to do, need to be taught, then you then adjust your lesson accordingly. Okay, it's very important. So that's why sometimes in the classroom we say, oh, good work. Did you say can or can't? This is actually part of the comments and you made the responses that you gave to the students, to the student, say group work or presentation in class is part of or are part of formal assessment. Okay, and also, for example, you look at their essay and you put a smiley there, and then you said, oh, and you tell your student, for example, oh, you broke the glass, not you break the glass, in a nice, very, supportive way. That is part of formative assessments. It's very different from summative assessment. Yeah, as I said just now, you shouldn't record their results. Yeah, try not to, because formative assessment is embedded in classroom in classroom teaching, which is in classroom task, and it's designed to elicit performance without recording results, without making any judgment, right? Okay, what about formal assessment of learning? Now, this is a bit different. This is when, say, for example, and we usually call the summative assessment, which usually occurs at the end of the course. And it involves what we call assessment of level. And this level assesses proficiency or competency of learners. For example, your final exams, in a particular course, or general proficiency exams. These are what you call summative assessments. So usually some involve the assessment of level. So particularly for summative assessment, CFR is particularly good for this. Yeah, we will talk about that later. Yeah. And one of the things that we've been talking about in relation to CFR is the notion of criterion-referenced testing. Okay, we are talking about criterion-referenced testing. These tests, these criterion-referenced tests, are actually designed to give test takers feedback, in the form of grades, and you specify on specific course or lesson objectives. If you have lesson objectives, then you give them grades according to lesson objective. For example, classroom tests involving students in only one course and connected to curriculum. Like if you have a curriculum, then you come up with a test, and you make sure that the test align with the curriculum, and then you give them marks, and to in order to know how they have performed in the course. This is sometimes called achievement test. And what you do is that in this kind of test, you situate a learner on the continuum of language proficiency based on predetermined criteria. So now if you use a CFR, you have from A1 to C1. So then you put on the continuum. So with a CFR, you can in fact define, like for example, what can A1 students do in writing, what can A1 students do in reading, and so on. So that in that way, afterwards we look at that. The CFR descriptors are particularly important in order to define the criteria that you use in order to put the students on the continuum. Now, this criterion is a set of standards outlining the knowledge, the skills and abilities judged necessary for the achievement of that standards. Then if you look at the CFR, later we look at the CFR is does not just contain, does not talk about skills and abilities, but the CFR also talk about knowledge. Afterwards, when I talk about language, what you mean by language proficiency in the CFR, then you can see what the CFR, what kind of information the CFR provides a teacher in order to know that this student is performing at B1 level in speaking, for example, in oral production, or or in oral presentation, or B2 in oral presentation, and there are descriptors that describe. But of course, the CFR needs to be adapted. It's very important. You need to adapt the CFR descriptors. If not, they may not be appropriate for the kind of students or the target students that you have, the kind of students that you're going to assess for the achievement in the course. Okay. Now, if, for example, you have any question, I would, invite you to just put in the chat so that we can discuss the issue that, is best when we have the issue put in the chat, then I can discuss with you so that we can immediately answer your own, what issues you have with assessment, and particularly with CFR aligned assessment. And the next thing that we need to know when we talk about assessment is assessment and test. When we talk about assessment is an ongoing process that covers a wide range of assessment methods. It's bigger, it's more general, and it's more, what do you call that? It's more abstract in nature, because you're talking about a process that covers a wide range of assessment methods. And all tests are actually formal assessments, but not all assessment is testing. Okay, like for example, you might use your students' assignment. Say, for example, you give a student an assignment, and you might use that assignment as a formal assessment of his or her attainment or achievement of certain, what do you call the course objectives. But this procedure could not be regarded as a test. It is not a test. You cannot call this a test. So it is an assessment where you give your students an assignment and you grade the assignment. But this is not a test. The language test is a subset of language assessment. It is a method of a test taker's measuring. It's a method of measuring a test taker's ability or performance in a given domain. Yeah, in a given domain. So that's very important. It's different. It is actually a method of measuring. The most important word is measuring. Measuring a test taker's language ability, yeah, or language proficiency or performance in a given domain. So you quantify the test taker's performance, yeah? So that's what you do. It is a process of quantifying a test taker's performance according to explicit procedures. So some tests, for example, measure the general ability of our students, right? Like the general proficiency test. And these are usually multi-scale and usually multi-level as well. And the other focus are very specific competency objectives. For example, I put there a test on vocabulary, a test on pronunciation. So that is still a test. Yeah, okay. But most important thing is you measure it. Yeah. So the next question you need to ask is if you are setting a test paper, for example, you're setting a test. Now, how can the CFR help you to set a test? We're going to look at that afterwards. Yeah, we're going to look at how the CFR descriptors can be used and adapted in order to set a formative assessment to assessment task. Yeah, formative assessment task, as well as a test, a more summative assessment task using the CFR descriptors. And we're going to look at that afterwards. But of course, we don't have much time, so we're just going to look at it quickly. But if you have any question, do ask. Now, another thing that you need to also have in mind, so just nice between assessment and testing, we have informal assessment, formative assessment for learning, and then we have what we call summative assessment to measure the students' performance or language ability using certain criteria. Yeah, that's criterion assessment, criterion-referenced assessment. Now, there's another thing that we also need to know is between what we call single level, multi-level, and level-specific approaches to testing. Now, multi-level means when you test, for example, if it is the CFR, then it's easier for us to say. Now, for example, you test like the MUET, you test from A2 to C1 plus, yeah, A2 to C1. So that's multi-level, yeah. And usually this kind of test is what you want to, the aim is you want to have to gain an overview of the whole range of abilities. You want to know, like, for example, in this target group, say in a population, like say Form 5 students sitting for SPM. So you want to know how many students say scored A2, B2, B1, and so on. So it's a whole range of abilities in a given population, a target population. Like the MUET, for example, those taking the MUET, they want to go to universities, yeah. They want to be admitted into university, then they have to take the MUET. So then you have, again, a whole range. But of course, that particular learner or that particular test taker will have will be given one grade or one CFR level. Yeah. So for example, either B1. For university entry, it's B1 or B2. So he will get that. Now that's multi-level. Whereas level-specific approaches, yeah, is feasible when the assessment focus lies on assessing specific levels of ability attainment. This is particularly so, this is particularly relevant to students in universities, because students in universities, they take a course, they enroll for a course. So for example, that course, the entry requirement is, for example, if there's an entry requirement, the entry requirement is B1, then the exit is B2. So you have one level. So from B1, you take the students follow the course, then, and based on a particular syllabus, yeah, the content of that syllabus, of course, students know the content of the syllabus because the teachers going to explain to them in the classroom. And then at the end of the course, the students will leave the course at B2. So from B1 to B2. So that's what we call level-specific approaches to testing. Yeah, so this is very important. But this kind of test, what we call in a classroom setting, yeah, it could be in a hall, depending. Sometimes we have a test in a classroom. It is much easier you don't need a lot of what do you call that validation, to test whether this test is valid or reliable, because the reliability is based on the link between the test and the curriculum or the syllabus that you have, as well as the teaching in the classroom. So that's easier to handle. So one level test is much easier to test paper is much easier to set than multi-level tests like the MUAT, IELTS, SPM. Yeah, all these are high stakes tests, TOEFL and all that. Okay, now the next important point I'm going to raise here is there are other issues besides knowing different certain terminologies about language assessment. There are other crucial issues of testing, and I hope that during the presentation that I'll be able to answer some of this. The first one is what is the nature of the language learning we aim to capture? So, for example, you teach this particular course, let's say oral presentation. So you need to ask yourself, what is the nature of language learning we aim to capture? So language presenting, what are you teaching and what are you testing? So say for example, you're doing it at B1 level, then if you use a CFR, you can refer to the companion to look at what you call addressing the audience. Yeah, this is oral presentation. What descriptors describe this particular ability to present, to give an oral presentation at B1 level. Okay, and that's the first one. The second one is how do you make distinction between tests offered at different levels on the proficiency continuum? Like for example, between the A and B and C. So that's much easier because as A will be, the basic user, A1 particularly, and then move up to intermediate, move up to advanced. But we have a look at that later. But what I'm saying is that more difficult is between A1 and A2 within that group, or B1, B2, and C1, C2. We're going to look at that. That's more difficult distinction to make. Yeah. So how does the CFR help us to make distinction between tests offered at different levels on the proficiency continuum from A1 to C1, perhaps to C2? Next is that when we say this particular student achieves, say, a certain level of general proficiency, say B2 general proficiency, or a specific competency, for example, in report writing or informal discussion, then what does it mean to say that? And that's very important. So, for example, if you say this particular student is intermediate in reading, what do you mean by that? Or when you say that this student is intermediate in formal discussion, what does it mean? Yeah. So does the CFR help us to define, make it clear what it means? So if I say that this student is a B1 student in oral presentation, can I actually list out what this particular can do in order to make clear that he is performing at this level using this criteria, and therefore he is B1 in oral presentation? Okay, right? You okay there? Can I hear some voices, or am I the only voice that can be heard? Or perhaps a chat. Hello.
Yes, Prof. Here.
Is it clear? Is my voice clear? That's okay?
Yes, Prof.
Okay, thank you. Because you don't know whether our voice is clear. Yeah, thank you. Okay. Now, and is that okay, Sister? So that's in relation to the to what we understand by language assessment. Is that okay so far? Yeah. So I think that's very important before we can go on talking about the CFR itself and later connecting the CFR to what I've said before. Yeah. Okay. Good. Thank you, Ajilin. Thank you very much, and Ali too. Okay. Good. Right. So now we're going to look at the CFR as a framework of reference for language assessment. Of course, you have heard this before. I think very importantly is you need to understand it clearly, because many people not just complain but express their what do you call that? Not just a disappointment, but because CFR can be quite difficult. Yeah, I must say that it's not easy. It's not easy. But you must remember, first of all, you all need to ask yourself, are you setting a test paper yourself? Are you writing the curriculum yourself? Are you writing the syllabus yourself? If that's the case, then you have to know a bit more about the CFR. You must be familiar. But if you're already using a framework that is already done for you, you have a syllabus, you have a scheme of work, you have a standard textbook, you don't have to know as much as someone who has to do all this. What I'm saying is that what you need to know is that, very importantly, what you need to know is that the CFR is about, the aim of the CFR is actually to develop the ability to perform in the language, to use the language in order to communicate. Yeah, it is actually relating what you do in the classroom to real world tasks. Yeah, so that's very important. So that's why the learning of grammar is important, but it is important insofar as how it helps a student, how it helps a student get across a message. If he's an A1 student, primary school, at A1, if he makes mistake in pronunciation, and that pronunciation doesn't affect communication, or if he makes mistake in, in not producing certain words, but the absence of these words does not affect communication, then you shouldn't be too worried about it. You shouldn't be too worried, because more importantly, you need to ask yourself, can he communicate at that level, at A1 level? And what is A1 level? That you need to know. So in general, all we need to know as as a teacher, particularly teaching it, is to have an idea what the ability to communicate actually involves. And what you need, the most important thing, you just have to look at the global descriptors. That's very important for you, so that you have an idea. So if I say this is a B2 student, what can he do in reading, in listening, in writing? So you don't have to go into the detail. But if you want to know, very well, go ahead. Yeah, but don't get confused by all the terminologies, by the can-do descriptors. Yeah, because no matter what, the CFR is still created by human beings, and as human beings, we make mistakes. So there are certain things in CFR which are a bit unclear, a bit uncertain, and needs to be discussed further. But what I'm pleased is that to say that they keep on improving on the descriptors. As they improve, we also improve, and we also need to we do not have to totally use the CFR descriptors. We can selecting is more important, and adapting the CFR descriptors so that they are more appropriate to our target group and to the situation that we use the descriptors for what purpose we use the descriptors. For example, in assessment, and we have to make sure that these descriptors are selected for assessment. Okay, so now if I'm going to, why I say this, because in this part of the presentation, there will be many descriptors, because I have, that's how you see my slides, quite a lot, but more important, but they contain tables of descriptors, so that we look at descriptors that are relevant to my presentation, relevant for assessment, and then we discuss them. So it's easier. That at least when you look at the descriptors again, you don't get confused, or rather, my goodness, so difficult. It is difficult, but we need to know, we don't have to know all. We just need to know to help us understand what we need to do as teachers. Yeah. Okay. Now let's go on to that. Now, so how does the CFR help us in language assessment, either at school or at university? Okay. Number one, the CFR has what we call a toolkit of resources. Yeah. And these toolkit of resources will help to inform and facilitate the intended users of CFR assessment by teachers who have an interest in language testing. Yeah. So if you have interest in language testing and you want to understand how you can write your own tests, or particularly for teachers, more of formative assessment perhaps, then CFR provide a toolkit of resources. I remember these resources you must adapt the resources to your situation and be more selective. I will talk about the resources later, especially when it comes to the CFR descriptors. Now, the next one is the next important point that we're going to talk about is the fact that the CFR raises awareness of important issues in language assessment. Yeah. So when we look at the CFR, when we study the CFR, we find there are certain issues which the CFR have sort of called our attention to them, which are very important in language assessment, and how the CFR sort of can be used. So you are not in a weak position. Yeah, you are in a strong position. How you use the CFR and adapt to address these issues. Yeah. So remember, it is issues are relevant to your own situation for teachers, for teachers in school and for teachers in the university when you teach your own course. Yep. Okay. What are the toolkit of resources? You must have heard this before, but I'll try to make them to explain so that you understand the descriptors, and so that we get over, even me when I first did it. When I first tried to understand, it was a very difficult. But as I understand what this is all about, I'm beginning to be less fearful. Yeah, less fearful, and and you understand more. As you understand more, you can see the strength and the weaknesses of the CFR, and you can see why or how the CFR can help us actually, not just writing, come up with test papers or assessment tasks, but also to link our assessment task, to what we teach in the classroom and to our syllabus, course content at university, and to the curriculum and syllabus at school. Okay. Now, the first, what do you call that, toolkit or resources from the CFR, of course, the levels and descriptors, the levels. And if you look at the description there, what the CFR provides are common points of reference. Yeah. So, for example, if I'm discussing with another teacher, say in Sabah, and I'm in Kelantan, and we are talking about students, say from 4 students at B1 level, say for example, as in speaking, for example. So when we talk, we have the same points of reference in terms of the level. We're talking about B1 student, for example. Yeah. And then you have, if at school, you have your curriculum framework, the general framework. Yeah, what students need to do. Although it might be a lot, sometimes you don't have to do all. You just need to say, okay, this is what B1 student can do. Say secondary, Form 4, for example. Yeah, and for university lecturers, when you talk to each other, discuss with your friends who are doing another course, you say, this student is actually a B1 in this course. He's a B1 in another course, for example. Yeah, so it makes it easy for you to discuss and to exchange ideas and improve your own course. Yeah? So that's the first one. So points of reference in terms of levels and in terms of descriptors. And also a common meta language in discussing language assessment. You have the common meta language. like you're talking about language ability, you're talking about what you call the communicative language competence in terms of pragmatic competence, linguistic competence, social-linguistic competence, so on. So you have the same, what you call that, meta-language, and you can say, oh, okay, turn-taking, for example, in interaction, students should know how to take turns. So again, that meta-language can be used when you discuss with your friends, yeah, in perhaps ascertaining the kind of task, or in identifying the appropriate task for your students, the appropriate assessment task for your students when you're assessing their interaction, say at B1 level. Yeah. So that's number one. Number two, so that's, if you see that, the reference level A1 to C2. So when I did the roadmap, when I set the target for the students from pre-A1 to up to university, these levels really helped me to set the target. Without this level, I don't know what I was supposed to do actually. If I were to just put elementary, elementary, standard 1, primary 1, elementary, primary 2, elementary, or it's very difficult. Or you may have grades, but if you have grades, where is the reference? Where's a common reference for this grade? Does everybody know what does grade A or grade B mean, or grade C, grade D mean actually? And can you describe a student who is an A, who you classify as A student in, say, for example, reading comprehension? Yeah? How do you do that? So that's very important. So that's why we need to have the meta language. And as I said, the common reference level will give you the proficiency. Yeah. So because of that, we are able to set, for example, A1, A2 at the exit target A2 when you leave school, primary school. Then you set the target and go, and then you go to university, leaving university at C1. So we are able to do that. And we are able to describe what can an A2 student do in English. You're able to describe that, yeah? So that's very important. This is what we call the common reference levels. And the more and most importantly, are the illustrative descriptors. These are the illustrative descriptors, which actually define the level. Yeah. So we're going to look at for later. So I need the tables, the global scale. So you have illustrative descriptors which define the level so that you actually know, oh, this student is actually, so you give sort of a global assessment of his or her ability. So when someone listens, for example, if I listen to, say 11-year-old a boy, give a presentation or talking, kind of, talking in a group, for example, and I listen to him talking individually, or contributing to the group discussion, we can sort of say, okay, he's actually, maybe a B1, maybe A2 high, looking at something, but that's still at the global level. Then you go and check the CFR descriptors that you have to actually say, yes, this is analytical, where you go actually to look at the criteria of assessment and you say, yes, he is looking at his pragmatic competence, perhaps his linguistic competence, the language he uses, and what he can do at that level. So all this together will enable you to say, profile this particular boy, at age 11, say, for example, he's very good. He's already going towards B1. So you can do that. And you be comfortable. You say, yes, he is actually a B1. Maybe low B1. All right. So this is so what we have is that a global scale, CFR level, which summarizes the overall descriptor scale. For teachers, you just need to have this. You need to just look at the global level. That's very important for you. And perhaps in a general, you do have scales for, overall, say overall scale for interaction, overall scale for reading comprehension, overall scale. These are the things you don't need to know all, just overall. So just to have an idea, what does it mean that this person reading comprehension is at B1, B2, and so on. Just some general, what do you call that, idea what it is. But if you have to set a test paper, that's different, yeah. We are supposed to set a test paper for MUHEN. You cannot just have a general idea about the ability. You actually need to know. That's when the details are very important. And that's when you really know. So you can just say like that. This is C1 because that you can say, yeah. And you can explain easily. So that is someone who sets paper for the MUET or SPM and so on. Okay, so there is a different level of knowledge and also procedural knowledge as well with respect to the CFR. All right. Then we also have what we call the overall descriptor scales. Yeah. If you see that the overall descriptor scale for language, listening comprehension, reading comprehension, so on. So you can do afterwards. We're going to look at the scale so that you feel comfortable with them before we can then apply for assessment. All right. So far, it's all right. Yep. Okay. We go on to the level here. So look at the level there. What's that? Something's not quite right. Okay. Oh, okay. Just here. This is the level I think all of you should know by now. I will not be explaining. But if you look at this one here, beginner, so beginner, intermediate, advanced. Okay. So we are so used to so many years, for so many years, we are used to using the word beginner, intermediate, and proficiency, while the CFR using the word basic user, intermediate user, proficient user, but the description, but this comes description. So when we talk about advanced proficiency student, do we have description for that? When we talk about in the past, yeah, it's very difficult because we usually refer to textbooks. For now, we have a guide, a framework of reference that tells us what do we mean by this, what do you mean by that, what do you mean by that. And this is progression, yeah? Progression in language learning from this to that. Okay, look at the next one. So you have our descriptors. These are the kind of descriptors. I'm not going to go in detail about that, but it's because it will help me with the application afterwards. Yeah. So if you look at that, I've already said that this is CFR global scale, which all of us who are teaching need to know. Yeah, at least. And then we have the illustrative descriptor scales. Yeah, we have the overall as well as specific scale to in relation to certain what we call communicative language activities. Okay. All right. So we go there. Okay, so these are the descriptors. Now, if you have your companion with you, you do refer to, yeah. So these are if you look at descriptors, it's a bit small there, but I would just, if you look at that one, don't worry about C2. But if you look at A1, A2, B1, B2, look at it together, how someone, a basic user. So this is, if you look at basic user for teachers, you need to understand this. So A1, for example, can understand and use familiar everyday expression. That's very important. Everyday familiar expressions, that's key, right? And be able to use very basic phrases, yeah, and in order to satisfy the needs of a concrete type. So all this familiar, yeah, basic phrases, and to satisfy needs of a concrete type, something which is concrete. Okay, so and then he can introduce himself, right? And others. So I'm Sarah, and this is my friend. Okay. So if a student can just say Sarah in normal conversation, that's okay because that's what we say. But of course, we want to teach our student to say I'm Sarah. Yeah. My name is Sarah. You don't usually say my name is Sarah. You say I'm Sarah. I'm Zoraida. Okay, and in a formal situation, you might use that. So then you help the student to develop continue. So what is very important, these are the keywords that teachers need to know so that she then be able to say, okay, in A1 class, students need to know this. Yeah, if students use less familiar words, less familiar expression, that means the student may be going towards A2 already. So you have this global profile of your students. Okay, that student perhaps is towards A2. Yeah. So we look at that, and the questions about personal details, where she lives, all that, okay? And the people they know, the things that they have, everything's about them. It is their own environment, yeah? Within their own environment, everything. And it must be concrete. That's a key, concrete, and they can use everyday expression. Very familiar with everyday expressions, yeah? And satisfy their own needs of a concrete type. It's about eating. So you don't talk to the students about feelings here. They cannot express feelings. At this level, feeling is still, it's not concrete. It is abstract. You can't say, why can't you say I'm sad? They can't, because it is an abstract notion, and to say it in a foreign in another language is not easy. Yeah, right. But there are students who'd be surprised that because they've been watching TV and so on, they may be able to express feelings. Yeah. Okay. If you go up, so these are the things that teachers need to know. So just have a general idea about what A2 is. A2 going to sentences reading. You can understand that sentences reading. So going beyond that, and then frequently use expressions, not really familiar, but not just familiar expression, but expressions which are frequently used. And if you look at that one there, and they can relate this to areas of most immediate relevance. Just now was satisfy of needs of a concrete. This is immediate relevance. Of course, it's very difficult for you to say, oh, how do you say that concrete? So what you need to do is this is one of the can do, one of the ability only, one of the can do statements. So you go on to the next can do. So use simple and routine tasks, communicate simple and routine tasks, and about routine matters, yeah, and can describe simple terms, his background, immediate environment, matters and areas of immediate need. Again, yeah. So you can see that you begin to see how this person A1 moved to A2. So look at your curriculum framework, look at syllabus and see, in general, what does it mean? What can a student, a primary school student A1 do? What can a primary student A2 do? Yeah. So you may find that, it's just not really much. They just need to do this, do that. Yeah. At A1, A2. But when you go up, then if you look at A, still within the personal environment, your own immediate environment, yeah. When you go up, then you're going out of that environment to school, work. If you are talking about adult work, of course, but students, school, leisure. So that's beyond the self to something else, yeah. And you go up, you see that. So if you see B1 there, and if you look, can deal with most situations likely to arise while traveling. So our student need not travel, yeah. So you don't have to worry about that. So what it means is that where the students, say for example, go to KL, we are not talking about elsewhere. So when he can use a language, in a language is spoken, for example, in a supermarket, for example, or in a hotel, so he can understand. He can use it, yeah, at this level, at B1 level, and can now describe experience at this level only. Then you can begin to bring in experience. So don't ask a student A1 or A2 to talk about the experiences, because experience is something that is a bit more difficult. It's more abstract than talking about concrete things. So that's when a B1 can talk about experience, can talk about dreams and hopes. Yeah. So you don't tell, how come my son cannot talk about hopes and dreams? But he's an A2 student. He still does not have the vocabulary, yeah, in order to talk about experiences, dreams and hopes, your ambition, yeah. And you can provide reasons. By now, reasons start coming in. So when you see anything, you give reasons. Okay, so that starts meaning of B1. And also, then you explain your opinion, and you give reasons, explain for opinion and plans. So then you start give your opinion and provide simple reasons and some explanations. And also, we are talking about plans. Again, plans, future. It is less common, is future. So then it is only a B1. Students are able to talk about their plans, their ambition, and all that. Is that okay? Are you okay with that? Do you want me to go faster, or is it okay for me to explain? Can you sort of give me some feedback? Hello? Yeah. Okay. Yes. If it's you find that if you think, oh, Prof, you're being so slow, I'm going to, so I can rush through. If you feel that helps you to concretize certain things and help you to understand a bit more, that helps. So yes, Nuru. But what about the others? Are you okay with that? This kind of pace, or would you like me to go faster? What do you think? Any response? No? Hello, are you there? Yeah, you okay? Yeah, with this? Okay. Then I'll go at this level. No rush. Okay, good. Right. So, okay. So fine. So I go at this level. So if you think, oh no, I know this already, Prof. So no. Okay. So we go up to B1. Yeah, you can talk about futures. It's more abstract. Yeah, and you can talk about your experience. You can describe. Yeah, you can describe in simple terms. Sorry. If you look at that, you can describe experience. There's no simple terms there. If you look at B1, A2 has got simple terms. But B1, events, dreams, and hopes. Briefly, yeah, and briefly give reasons, which means that you don't expect them to give a lengthy reason, just briefly. Okay, so now you can see, yeah, I'm going up, yeah? So I'm going up now so that you can see. This is very important if you set your own, if you describe your own, if at university you write your own course, and at school you may want to, give a test, a formative test to your student. So this is very important. You go up slowly so that we understand, how we understand all the descriptors. Okay, so we go up to B2 now, still within what we call independent user. Yeah, and this, as I said, just we can also call this intermediate if you feel comfortable with the intermediate. But in the CFR, we use the term independent user. Now, at this level, we're going to B2. If you look, shall I? If you start at the bottom there, so let me explain. At the bottom, just above B1, there's a line. So so if for here is okay because these are different. What do you call that? Different skills. Yeah. But if you later, when we talk about illustrative skills for specific communicative language activities, then the one nearer to the line, so for example, A2, you have a line there, those at the bottom here will be descriptors which are closer to A2. Yeah, as you go up, if you go to B1, near the line, that these are descriptors that are closer to B2. Okay, but for global scale, it's okay because this just doesn't show that kind of gradation from A2 going to B2. Yeah, here it's different here. Okay, but later when we look at illustrative skill, you can see the difference between descriptors nearer to the line A2 towards down to A2, and from descriptors towards the upper part of B1, which is towards B2. Yeah. Okay. Now let us look at B2. Now if you see that B2, this when you say main ideas here, can understand. So understand refers to reading comprehension as well as listening comprehension. Yeah. But usually listening comprehension will not, the ideas will not be as complex. The text will not be as complex as reading comprehension. More complex than A2, but not as complex. So when you talk about comprehension, the main ideas of complex text, listening text will not be as complex as reading text, because because reading you can read several times, whereas for listening it is once, or what you play twice, that's it. Yeah, you cannot keep on referring to unless you have a recording. That's different. Anyway, so when you say can understand them, so if you look at B1, you understand main points, of clear standard input, and this can be listening, of clear standard input on familiar matters. Okay, right. If you look at B2, can understand the main ideas. We go on from main points to main ideas, and then the input is more complex. Whereas B1, clear standard input, less complex. Okay, and you still play with the word familiar. B1, familiar matters. So you go up to the level of understanding main points, but the text, either listening or reading, must be clear and must be standard input. Okay, on familiar matters. And this must be that you're familiar with. That means you regularly encountered in school, for example, at leisure, for example, or anywhere else that your students frequent. These are the places where you see them. For example, I don't know, maybe while going shopping and all that. Yeah, maybe in KL, not here, or like, for example, in the coffee bean, people do speak English there. Okay, so you may encounter this kind of situation in that, for example, when you go to have coffee and all that. Now, so you can understand the main point of a clear standard input on familiar matters, and the word regularly, yeah, that's very important. Familiar, regularly, okay, and can deal with most situations likely to arise while traveling anywhere where the language is spoken. So, for example, if you go to KL and you go to the coffee bean, for example, where people do tend to speak English, then you can deal with most. You can deal with it. You can order your coffee, yeah, and you say, "Oh, I can't speak I can't speak English well. I speak Malay, and I speak Malay." So you can say something like that, yeah. Maybe you don't say, "I can't speak English," or "I can't speak English. I'll speak Malay." So there's nothing wrong with that. Malay is our native language. What I'm saying is that you may encounter the use of language in this situation. Okay, so if for a B1 student can deal with and can produce simple connected text on topics which are familiar. Again, the word familiar. So B1 still retain the notion of familiarity, still familiar, and the input should be clear, standard input. Okay, still, and that's B1. And okay, whereas if you go to B2, you have main ideas, yeah, more difficult than main points, and complex text. You have now the abstract start coming in only at B2. Okay, so A1 concrete, A2 still concrete, B1 a bit more. You have dreams, that's less concrete, but still the word abstract is not there. Okay, but you know it is a B2, yeah, in understanding. Yeah, when you read, when you listen, then you understand the main ideas of complex text on both concrete and abstract topics. So this one we can let them listen to people talking about feelings. They can read text on emotions, how people feel, on people's experience, and that giving opinions, that kind of thing. Yeah, including technical discussion. So this is when at this level in B2, technical discussion can come in. So at university, for example, you can study ESP here, yeah, where you use technical terms and all that, EAP, ESP, not the general ESP, but specific to your course, for example. This is good to start, ESP, EAP, yeah. And if you look at that, technical discussion, his or her field of specialization. So you can discuss on technical matters, yeah, and can interact with a degree of fluency, not fluent, totally fluent, but a degree of fluency. You can look at, if you want to look at fluency, what fluency means, you go to communicative language competence under fluency, yeah, in the volume, in the companion volume, so you know what actually fluency involves. Okay, so a degree of fluency and spontaneity, that means to a certain extent spontaneous, not totally spontaneous, but to a certain extent. So you cannot sort of you cannot sort of just give them something for them to just talk about it. It's not possible for a B2. It's possible, but they will not be that good, yeah, not as good as C1 student. Okay, that makes regular interaction with native speakers, quite possibly without strain for either party. So we don't have native speakers here, maybe in KL, but people who speak good English, for example. So when you speak to a B2 student, yeah, for example, a lecturer speaking to B2 students, a B2 student will not have a problem interacting with the lecturer in English. I will not have any problem. So we don't need to have a native speaker. Just talking to your own lecturer, yeah, because your lecturer's English is good, is excellent. So just talking to the lecturer, and this student feel comfortable and able to interact without much strain, yeah, both for the teacher as well as the student, yeah, because if there is strain For example, if I don't quite understand the student, he's talking to me, so this student is not B2. Yeah. So then you ask yourself, is he B1? Then you bet, is he B1? But if you see that, it seems to be, can't even express himself and cannot even produce simple connected text, he's not B1. You go down then, okay, and then you know, he might be a A2 student. Okay, with this general description. All right. Hello, yes. I cannot see that. It's hidden by the slide. Why do you think certain teachers, Nurul, can you read it for me? Why do you think certain, because it's hidden by the slide number. Would you be able to read it for me? Why do you think certain teachers? Okay, go ahead. I cannot see. Hidden by my slide number.
I muted just now, sorry, just on my mic.
Okay.
All right, so Professor, what I'll be the question. Professor, why do you think certain teachers are finding it a challenge to score C1 level or band 5 from WET?
Okay, if you look at C1 level, yeah.
C1 level.
Is it C1 level are you talking about? Yeah. Yes?
She is at C1 level.
Okay, right. So if you look at just look at C1 level there, like if you look at, can understand a wide range of demanding longer text and recognize implicit meaning, which means that if you at C1, yeah, it depends again whether sometimes, not that the teachers do not know, I think sometimes you are not, because when you become, you've been working so long, you are not used to reading long text. Do you know what I'm trying to say? Like if you're an academic like us, it's part of our life. It's part of us. We read long text all the time and very difficult text. It's not that whether our English is good, but we read difficult text and very complex text every day. Yeah. So this, if you look at that, a wide range of demanding longer text and recognize implicit meaning. It's very important. That's C1. C1, you must be able to understand implicit meaning. Yeah. So a teacher must be able to do that. Yeah. But as I said, and usually this is understanding, which means reading comprehension and listening. Yeah, reading comprehension, listening. So this one thing about why we need to, very important, is that you need to have practice all the time. Yeah. So if you listen to lectures, listen to more demanding texts, for example, then you practice and you manage to grasp. So it's more of practice. It's very important that that if you need to do that, teachers, particularly to get C1, you must be able to read longer text, and not like newspaper article. That is not a C1. Yeah, longer text, very complex text, and also must understand implicit meaning. So the reading comprehension question will be more focused on implicit. So if you look at the MWET, it will be like the last text that's most difficult, and usually that's a literary text. Yeah, literary text, because it contains idiomatic expressions and all that, or it might be complex in terms of technicality of the text. All right, more general. I'm not talking about in engineering, but more general technicality of the text. So that's the first one. When we look at express herself fluently, I think teachers may not have problems speaking. Yeah, but this notion of fluency and also spontaneously, without much obvious searching for expressions. The thing is that sometimes people may not understand what do you mean by searching for expressions, because in normal impromptu speech, of course you search for expressions because you are talking impromptu, but the level of searching for expression may take a longer time, or you may not be able to produce the correct expressions. It's more of that rather than not being able to produce expression. Yeah, because and also I think we also need to make sure that when we talk about being unable to, in fact, for effective speaking, people tend to have pausing, what we call strategic pausing. in order to produce the most effective, to come up with the most effective words. And that take a bit of time. You just keep quiet. I think so. And then you pause, and then you start producing your, the words that you want to find, in your brain. So that's something can take a bit of time, right? Okay, Doctor, you must be C2 in English. I'm not. I do not have never taken a test. I haven't taken a test for a long time. Okay. Yes. So that's and then if you look at that, the next for C1 is flexibility. You use a language flexibly. So, for example, the teacher, for example, must be able to sort of change the words that they use. If you look at this particular person does not seem to understand what, or a student in class, for example, may not understand what you say. You have the command of the language to change and make sure that people understand. And that's also an important ability of a C1 person, yeah. And next one is there. Use language flexibly and effective for social, cross, not just social, academic, and professional purposes. So that's why a C1 is very important for a teacher, because you should be able to use it for professional purpose, which is teaching in the classroom, yeah, particularly for speaking. But as I said, sometimes, because it's a test, yeah, sometimes when we sit for a test, we may not be well, or you have other things that you need, so you may not perform as well. But if you listen to the teacher talking, you actually know she's actually C1. But how come? You ask yourself, how did she manage to get B2 whereas she's actually C1 when you talk to her personally? So we need to take that into consideration as well, yeah? Okay. Now, so as we go, so from B2, is that okay? And the next one, when you write, it's very important that you produce clear, well-structured text. So if you see a student writing a text which is not clear, yeah, using a lot of bombastic words, prolixity in the writing, that's not a good writing. Good writing means clear, well-structured, you have detailed knowledge on complex subjects. That's another thing. If you read a lot, you can write. You can write because you have the knowledge in order to write. C1. So we're talking about C1 here, not just being able to write here, can produce here, but have the knowledge to write on on complex subjects. That's not easy. Yeah, that's not easy. Okay. And showing control or use of organizational patterns. That means the discourse, how you organize your writing, your talk, and connectors and cohesive devices. So if you look at C1, where coherence and cohesion are very important, yeah, you can connect the sentences very well using, connectors and cohesive devices to make your writing or your speaking very well organized, and people can understand what your explanation. Okay, so when we go from B2 to C1, you can see different already. The text not just complex but longer and demanding and a wide range. Yeah, so if you look at B2, wide range is not there. Okay. So that means you can read text, you can read, say, a novel, you can read text on emotions, you can read any text. It's a wide range, not any, sorry, but a wide range of text. And these texts are actually long and demanding. And implicit meaning, again, come in. If you look at that, implicit meaning for C1 start to come in. Okay? Now, can produce clear, well-structured, detailed text on complex text showing control, not just being able to join sentences, but control of that. So if you look at a person who writes, yeah, like for example, for us, we write all the time. We write for journal, we write reports, we write books, all that. So we are actually, lecturers actually beyond C2. And more, we call that professional. Yeah, these are just proficiency. So those lecturers who work at university, they should go beyond that to professional, because you are the level professional. Yeah, so beyond C2 actually. But here we're not talking about that. We are talking about proficiency. So we follow this. And if you look at C2 there, now if you look at C2, it is ease. You see the word ease there? Ease. It's so easy. The words just come out so easily. Okay? Yeah. So so easily. And you listen to it so easy when you listen to this person talking, or when you read the text, it's so easy. You understand it with ease, and you can summarize information from different spoken and written sources. So not just this, you have different, so you summarize and you synthesize. Okay, and you can express this person, a C2 learner, can express himself, herself spontaneously, very fluent and precisely. Yeah. And differentiating finer shades of meaning, even in more complex situations. So why I spend a bit of time here is that this is very important, particularly for teachers, to know how you move from A1 to up to C1. So forget about C2, yeah. But there are our students who actually perform at C2. These are really our crème de la crème. Okay? Yes. Shall I answer the question, or? Yeah, do you want me to take that question? I can answer if you'd like me to answer, or do you want me to continue?
Prof, do you want to take the question, or do we want to save it for our Q&A at 4-ish?
I mean, if the question is relevant to this, I can take the question. I mean, I can answer the question. Okay, depending on the question.
Can we have that again? Question from Peter Clarence.
Yeah.
Hi, Prof. Should students' probable lack of general knowledge be taken into account when determining the CFR level? Should students' probable lack of general knowledge be taken into account when determining their CEFR level?
Okay. Yes. The thing is that when a student does not have enough background knowledge, he may not be able to talk about the things that he's supposed to talk about. See, if you look at the CFR has what we call CFR has two kind of competences. One, general competences, which include this, what Peter asked, the general knowledge, yeah, and then the communicative language competences, which consists of language competences. Yeah? How much language you have? What do you know in terms of language? I know how to use past and present tense and all that kind of thing. Or pragmatics competence, where you join sentences together to make it clear. Okay. In interaction, we talk about turn taking and all that. Fluency, yeah. Whereas social linguistic competence, but whether when you talk to people, do you know how to be? About the conventions of being polite. Like if you're talking to an older man, an older person, you know how to use words so that you use words which are polite. So if you do not know how to do that, you are actually not a C1, C2. Even though your English is good. I mean, in terms of language, of course, you are a C1, C2. But in terms of, so these are what we call general competences, which are also taken into account in the way especially when you write. If you don't read a lot, you will not be able to give the content that is required. Okay? But for A1, A2, remember, it is just about themselves. So they have the vocabulary about themselves, their parents, their family, their sister, their pet. Okay, so as you go up, you need to read more. So if you look at C1, C2, you need to be able to read a lot. So you must do a lot of reading, have a lot of knowledge before you can write. Yeah, for C1, C2 in particular. Does that answer your question, Peter? Hello?
I think that's
okay. Thank you. So right, we go on to the next one then. Yeah. So this one, this is about the, again, global but specific to the skill. These are old ones, yeah. These are taken from the old book. But if you look at the companion volume, you find that you have overall, say, listening comprehension, overall reading comprehension. Then you have all the overall descriptors that describe overall reading comprehension, listening comprehension, interaction. Then you have the specific ones. So if you are not setting papers, you are not what do you call that, have to write a curriculum, at the general level is enough, because that will give you an idea what the child is, at what level. Like, for example, when I go through this with you, you should be able to listen to a child and say, oh, he's actually A2. Yeah. You see what I mean? You can just say, oh, he's A2, not A1. Oh, he's not B1, actually. He's actually A. Between A1 and A2, you may find it difficult, but you know he's not B1. Yeah? Then you go down. Is he A2? Then you go down further. Okay? Yes. Right. Now we go on to the next one. Yep. Now we still have a few more slides. Okay. Right. This is just a, now, this is explain a bit more. If you look at that one there, it's too small for me. There are, when we talk about descriptors, if you look at the volume, there are the descriptors that are in the volume are for 3 different aspects of proficiency. Yeah. The first is the communicative language activities. If you look at that, instead of calling, in the past, we call skills, language skills. But in the CFR, they call, instead of language skill, they call communicative language activities. And these include reception, so don't say listening, yeah? Reception, under reception, you have listening and reading comprehension. So you have communicative language activities, reception, production, interaction, mediation. Okay, and then you have the subcategories: reception, listening, and reading comprehension. Production, yeah, you have, of course, spoken and oral. It's not spoken now. Oral and written production, yeah, oral and written production. Then you have interaction, oral and written interaction, and of course, mediation. So we are not doing mediation. So these are 3 that you need to know. Okay, so the 3 FR have descriptors for communicative language activities, yeah. For communicative language strategies, you need to know strategies. But remember, you don't have to know this unless you set the papers yourself. These strategies are usually not that important. But as teachers, I think, you may have in your curriculum framework. But if you just want to find out, it's okay, yeah. Because this will, for example, if you're looking at your students doing informal interaction, yeah. So the strategies a student need to know, yeah, is turn taking. How you, how you allow people to, you give people the turn and you take the turn. Okay, as you go, if you find that, so this will help you to understand, oh, at C1 level, he can do this in terms of turn taking. So that allows you to actually look at your students and say, wow, this student, even though he's like, he's in Form 4, he's actually B2 or C1. Look, just by looking at him interacting with his friends. Yeah, looking at him, how he give his turn, and how he comes in, how he asks for turns in order to give his opinion. See what I mean? So that will give you some knowledge about turn taking, but you don't have to. Okay, more importantly is, we go to the next one, is communicative language. That's very important. Communicative language competence. They actually describe students' competences in terms of language, linguistics competence, in terms of social linguistic competence, like conventions of politeness, yeah, in terms of pragmatic competence, how he connect the sentences together to form a coherent whole. So from A1, A2, they can't do that. B1, they can just join using firstly, secondly, and give some reasons because, yeah, but the C1 and C2, that's very important, where coherence and cohesion are part of C1 ability. Okay, so when you listen to someone at B1, not just being incoherent, but a student does not use, for example, cohesive devices, yeah, which join sentences together. It's okay because at their level, that's not what is required of them. Yeah, that's not what is required of them. Okay, so that you must remember. That's very important so that we don't give students lower marks than they should have. Yeah, okay. Next, if you look at this is for you to go and read this interaction. If you want to read, you go ahead. So, but again, these are when I did the Elham with my group. Elham is we did the task packs for university courses. So we have to study this because we come up with the task packs. We need to know this in detail. Okay, particularly for those doing spoken in production and interaction. But for teachers, you just need to say, for example, you want to find out in conversation, for example, what are the descriptors in conversation that describe a student moving from A1 to C1, or informal discussion. So if you're interested, you can go to the volume and find out what are the descriptors that describe students' involvement in informal ability to engage in informal discussion from A1 to C2. Yeah, but for school only A1 to C1. Okay. Right, we go on to the next one. So this one you can find it. Okay, I think I go on to that. We have a bit more time there. What time is it now? It's 4:02. Oh dear, I better go quickly then. This is communicative language competence, and for teachers, it's very important. Linguistic competence and lexical competence, like for example, at B1 level, what kind of words they should know. That's very important. So this, if you can read the companion on lexical competence, then you find that you say, oh, no wonder at this level they don't have to know this. They need to know this, know that only. So grammatical competence, semantic, all this. Okay. And social linguistic competence in terms of politeness conventions, please, can I, would you mind? Yeah. But at B1 level, at A2 level, you don't have to say, would you mind? They don't know what it means by would you mind. You keep saying, no, you have to use would you mind. No, at that level, you don't have to. If they produce it, good. If they don't, it's not within it's not part of their ability. You expect that at C1 level. Yeah. Okay, so that's why you need to have an idea what words or what grammatical structures are required at a certain level. Okay, and this one in terms of social-linguistic competence, in terms of register differences, formal, informal. So A2 does not need to know that. Yeah? So you find that A2, when they listen to a text, which is very, when they listen to listening text, the listening text is very slow. The words are properly pronounced. It looks as if it is, it is not real. They can't listen to fast speech. You can't. Yeah. And so you listen to, oh, my name is Ali. I'm 6 years old. So you listen. So what kind of listening text is it? But that is for the A group, the A2 students. Yeah. So as you go up, then you find that the listening text get more complex, more difficult. Yeah. Especially the C level, C1, C2. All right. So, okay. So you can have a look at that. All right. Go to the next one. I think these are the bit small there because I don't have. This is communicative language ability for overall oral interaction. So overall is important for you to have to understand. For example, if you look at overall interaction for A2, A2. Let us go down first. As I said, the one nearer, if you look at A2, look at the bottom one. Start with the bottom that's nearer to A1. Yeah, if you look at A2, can handle very short. See the word short there? So you don't give them a task where the exchanges are long. At this level, the exchanges are supposed to be short. So when you come up with a task, make sure the exchanges are short, not long. Yeah, how short it should be, and you can look at some sample tests, yeah, Cambridge ESOL, Cambridge English, they have sample tests for A2. You can have a look at how short this should be, right? We have that in Elham as well, but it's rarely able to understand. So they can't understand conversation, as going off their own accord. So but it's rarely able and enough to keep going. So which means that they sort of cannot understand enough for them to just be independent. Yeah, you know what I mean? They still this. So you have to talk to them slowly and make sure that it's clear, and you have to help them a bit. Yeah, so they cannot. So they are really able enough to keep converse going of their own accord. I mean, from their own, from themselves, from them. They can't. You need to help them. Yeah. So that's interaction. Yeah. Can interact with. So can communicate in simple routine tasks require simple and direct exchange of information. See, at this level, they just exchange information, and this information must be familiar. So if you see, the keywords are always familiar, yes, simple, concrete for the A group. Okay, so you move up A1 to A2, you can see, but still the word simple is there, familiar, and so on. All right. But when you go to B1, you use the word exploit. Now a wide range. See? Okay, of simple language, but the language still simple. You don't expect them to use complex language. It's still simple. All right. To deal with most situations likely to arise while traveling. So your student do not travel. So for example, I don't know, they go shopping or they go follow their parents to KL. Yeah, they are able to understand simple language. Okay. Can enter unprepared into conversation with unfamiliar topics. Because they can be unprepared, yeah, but the topic must be familiar. Yeah? Can enter unprepared. That means they can come in, can participate in a conversation unprepared, but the topic must be familiar. So when you set a assessment task, must make sure the topic at this, even at B1 level, is familiar. What has changed is that they can enter unprepared into conversation. Yeah. So if Mued, if you see them in a group, yeah, in a group, what do you call that? When they sit in a group for group discussion, and this student able to enter into conversation unprepared, yeah, then he is a B1. So that's a global assessment. Okay, so when you want to find out more, you go and look at the detail. But I think it's easier for teachers to just listen to your student and be able to say, yes, this is A2. Yes, because he can't do this, he can only do that. So you just put can, he can talk about familiar things, yeah, and the exchange is short, that kind of thing. Okay, so this will help you, as I said, this overall interaction, overall, anything to be overall in oral interaction, overall reading comprehension, you may want to just check them out and have a read, but you don't have to go into the detail. Yeah. Okay. Right. Next. This is informal discussion with friends. Yeah. That's, I'm not going to go for that, but you have a look again. The progression is like that. Okay. So we're going to go to the next one because I need to talk about how you apply this in your assessment. We have about half an hour. Yes, I can have enough time for that. And this is descriptor scale for turn taking. Yeah, remember I talked about turn taking just now? It is A1 no descriptor because A1 cannot take turns. So they don't know what taking turns means. So you see them talking and they talk at any time they like, anytime they like. They don't take turns. Yeah, and they don't know how to express. So if you look at that, whereas A2, they can start ask for attention. They can make themselves heard. That you can say, okay, what do you want? So they can ask for attention, yeah, and they can initiate and maintain. They can initiate the conversation. They can maintain, yeah, close, simple, face-to-face, yeah. So face-to-face interaction. Can use simple techniques to start, yeah. maintain or end a short comment. They can end a short comment and they can maintain. Okay, that's A2. So if you look on, go on and so on, you can see how they change. But sometimes, as I said before, there might be some difficulty to differentiate one level to the next. Yeah, not clear. Especially when I was working with the Elham group, they find difficulty sometimes to say, is this a B2 or is it a B1? Yeah, because sometimes the description is not that clear. That is to be expected, yeah. So we hope that they can come up with more clear descriptors. But if they are not clear, then you may want to make it clearer by looking at other books and other materials. Okay, but as I said, you don't set papers, so you don't have to worry about this. You just need to understand a bit. You don't have to worry. You don't even have to remember. You just need to have an idea between A, B, and C. Okay, so A, familiar, concrete. That's very important. Okay, right. Okay, we go to the next one. This is what I want to do, linking. So just now I talked about the descriptors, which you can read, but how do you use all these descriptors in order to address, there's typo error, to address issues in language assessment? Yeah, how do you do that? Using the CFR just now to address issues in language assessment. Let us look at the issues in language assessment. Yeah. So very importantly, when you want to set a test, you need to understand certain issues. Number one is, what is language proficiency? Yeah. What is language proficiency? What is involved in testing language proficiency? How do we test what you want to test? Yeah. For example, how do you make distinction between tests offered at different proficiency levels? How do you distinguish between B1 and B2? What does it mean to say, I bring that back? Remember, I bring it at assessment just now, issues in assessment. I bring it back to relate to the CFR, the same question I asked. What does it mean to the student achieve a certain level of general proficiency or a specific competency in report writing? So remember, I told you there are descriptors for general proficiency and there are descriptors for specific competency, like for example, report writing and all that. Yeah? And a test instrument, very important, must specify a form of reporting measurement. So whatever it is, when you come up with a test, you must have a reporting measurement, which means a means for telling the test taker, giving the test taker the result. Yeah. So if you, for example, if at university you come up with a test, how do you report to the taker what he has achieved? What do you tell him? That you say, you managed to get B1 in oral presentation. What does it mean by B1? How do you tell him? So the CFR descriptors with some adaptation may enable you to tell him that you are this. Okay? Right. Now, we go on to what is language proficiency. Let me see. Let me just see how much more I have here. Okay, sorry. Now this is CFR. Because we have aligned our curriculum to the CFR and we are teaching the CFR. So the notion of proficiency must be the notion of proficiency as defined by the CFR. So if you look at the CFR, the primary goal of language is development of communicative ability. That's all. Enable our students to communicate in English, in French, Italian, Arabic. That is the thing, to enable our students to communicate in English. And in order to, what does it mean to communicate? Which means that he must be able to interact, yeah, and communicate in English, which involves reception, listening, and reading, yeah, and production, yeah. Production means producing spoken language. Must be able to speak the language, yeah, not just interact. He must be able to understand reading comprehension text, must be able to understand listening text, and must be able to produce in speaking and in writing. Okay, so interacting is important, comprehension is important, listening and reading, as well as production in terms of writing and speaking. That's what it means here. The ability to communicate. Be able to speak, interact, write, and understand what you read and understand what you listen. That is communicative ability. Okay, now, so I've explained that, so we don't have to worry about that. Now, another important thing is that for all of us, when we teach proficiency, we need to make sure that we need to regard our student as a social agent. Right? I mean, he is a human being, human being who needs to use his competences, his language, all that, the vocabulary, and you need to be able to use certain strategies in order to accomplish a task. That's need to do. So if you assign a task, let's say as a B1 student, write about your experience, traveling with a friend somewhere, say for example, write about your experience. That is a B1, okay, B1 task. Now you should be able to then, the student should be able to then, in order to write that task, he should have enough competences. That means he should be able to have the language, and not just a language, but be able to know how to write about experience. That means he needs a vocabulary. He needs to join sentences together as well, and he needs to know how to write about his experience. Is it an essay? Is it a report? Do you see what I mean? But for B1, if he writes a report, he doesn't have to follow the format of report. He just reports. He's just reporting the function of reporting. He just report. Whereas a B2, when he writes a report, he must have a kind of report which has conventions of reporting, the genre of reporting. That means he must write in the form of a report. A C1, for example, he writes a report, you must know the introduction, the body of a report, the conclusion, and so on. So it must follow certain conventions. You see what I mean? So for a B1 student, when you write a report, you don't have to worry about introduction and all that. If you do teach them, it's okay, but the B1 can just report something. It doesn't have to follow certain conventions, because they are not there yet. A B2 will have to, of course. Okay, if you tell him to write a report following certain conventions reporting, then you have to give him the easiest one, give them the easiest one. Okay, right. So this is what you need to do. Okay, so they need to have the competences, and this include all this. All right, so there you need to have all this, but these are at different level. So what it means is that actually the CFR just tell the teacher, these are the things that you need to know. You don't have to explain to them. You need to help the students. What language do they need? In order to be able to speak at B1 level or to write at at A2 level. What help do they need in terms of language, in terms of socio-linguistic competence, okay, or in terms of pragmatic competence. You find that at the lower level, sometimes you don't need certain things. You need all this, especially at a higher level. Okay, we don't have time for that, but never mind. So these are more of the detail. Okay, let us look at now. I'm going to look at the assessment. I think this is more important for teachers. Okay. Now, the CFR descriptors, when you adapt, if you look at that one there, with adaptation, provide a basis for test task development or assessment task development, or you call assessment task, and criterion-referencing testing. Criterion-referencing is like you give a test, there are certain criteria, right? For example, MUET is criterion testing, criterion-referenced testing, IELTS, because there are criteria, and the criteria come from the CFR descriptors. Now, if you look at that one, task development, now you write your task derived from relevant CFR descriptors, but you need to adapt and make sure that these descriptors, and to be adapted so that they are relevant to the context, and as well as they must complement and complemented by context-specific learning goals. What are your learning goals? Okay, you must do that. So you have CFR descriptors, You need to adapt, and it need to be complemented by your context-specific learning goals. Yeah. Now, what about criteria testing? Criteria, as I said just now, when you write a test, criterion reference, you have a predetermined criteria. Yeah. That means you have identified what are the criteria that these students, based on this criteria, this particular student is at A2 level, is at B1 level, but based on criteria. Yes, like SPM, MUET, and some of you doing examinations in school, you may have criteria, yeah, because CFR aligned, of course you have criteria. Teachers at university, you also have criteria. See, these will be called criteria reference. And the descriptor, you can use descriptor to describe a particular level for the assessment of achievement as well as for assessment of learning. Okay. Now let's look at some example. I have this. Okay. This teachers may want to use this. This is what we call about. We go to continuous assessment first and followed by performance assessment. If you look at in the classroom, for example, yeah, teachers usually test a student, assess a student formatively because they want to know how well the students have learned the lesson. Isn't that right? And in school in particular, they do have formative assessment. But how do you use CFR in order to help you, in order to help you assess your student formatively, so that you know what their levels are and you can help them accordingly. Okay, now you can read my slides later, but let us look at, because we don't have much time. So this is what we call, this is a continuous approach. Continuous assessment, you can use a checklist approach. Yeah, I think you all have done it already. Yeah, checklist approach. What you do is that you get the checklist approach, and you can get this from, it's already available there. I can show you the checklist where you can actually identify, use the CFR descriptors as your checklist. The descriptors are certain, for example, yeah, you just look at this one here. This is, can you see that? Is it too small? Yeah, can you see that?
Can you see that? Yeah, I think it's okay. Maybe make it a bit bigger, Prof. This one.
I make it bigger.
I think we can all zoom, isn't it?
Oh, you can observe. Okay. If you see the checklist there, this is at level A1. Yeah. You can have a checklist. In fact, you can just have this checklist. You can just go to the internet. They have lots of this. In fact, for teachers, you already have the framework and the syllabus. You can just come up with a checklist like this, where, you can access your student using this checklist in general, but teachers sometimes have so many students. I don't know about university teachers, whether you have many students in a class, but you can use this checklist to just have an idea about your students. And you can also ask a student to also tick the checklist. Right? Like for example, let me just see, for A1 listening, yeah, here, A1 listening, I can understand when someone speaks very clearly to me and I cannot see here, and articulates carefully with long pauses for me to assimilate meaning. Okay, now you have to explain to your students, of course, what assimilate meaning is. That's quite difficult, yeah? So what it means is that when people speak to him slowly and clearly, he can understand. Okay, you don't even have to use the word simulate. I can understand when people speak to me slowly and clearly. Then he can put a tick. Okay? Then next one, I can understand simple directions to get here, to get from X to Y, and so on. So you can have all this list and divide into, because you're doing all the skills. Yeah? I'm not sure whether at school you're doing all the skills. You do general proficiency. So you have listening, reading. So what you can do, like this one, you can have listening and a few can-do statements. Reading, a few can-do statements. And then interaction, a few can-do statements, and so on. Writing, a few. Then you put this, and you either can tick or you can follow this. And when you have my slide, you can see but you can access actually. There's so many, especially European language profile. They have all this list. Yeah, you can just download and come up with your own list.
Oh, sorry, we have about 6 more minutes on air.
Oh, sorry. Oh, dear. That's more than... Never mind. Let us go on to the next one. This is performance assessment. This is heavy. Yeah. This one is more for people who have to set their paper. And I don't know whether teachers at school are supposed to do, but university lecturers, yes, it's very important for that, because you have your course, isn't it right? You have a course, then at the end of the course, you're supposed to assess students' performance. And this is what you need to do, where you use the CFR descriptors to help you to write the, what do you call that, the task. So you can, number one, use the descriptors to come up with a task, and then you can use the descriptors, particularly from communicative language competence, to set the criteria for assessing the quality of students' performance. All right. So there's not much time actually, because I didn't realize 2 hours is too short for this. Yeah, maybe it's more for kind of workshop. But anyway, these are all here. I've got all this, yeah, for you all to have a look. All this, but it's, as I said, if you all are familiar with CFR, we can go straight into this. My fear is that in case you are not that familiar with CFR, to go into this may be a bit more difficult, because it's assumed that you have some knowledge. Okay, so all this, I don't know whether I can continue, but if you, how many more minutes? We have about...
Oh, it's okay, Prof. We have a bit of more time. Maybe you can just skip through, because all participants can have access to the recording on our channel. So yeah, so they can review your slides on YouTube.
Okay, no problem. It's just that this one, unfortunately, this, and I would like to go to do this, but it's quite heavy going, because if it's at the beginning, it's okay. But what you need to do, very importantly, if you see that one there, what you need to do when you doing testing, very importantly, is let me just see, yeah, to know what actually is involved in testing. Number one, you need to identify the target proficiency level that to be tested. That's very important. So, of course, a teacher would know that, because they have got the curriculum framework and all that. They know what actually, they don't need to identify, because they know. Like, for example, the target level for each what do you call, for primary school, for secondary school, for university lecturers, you've got to do that, because you have more freedom to set depending on the kind of students entering your university. So if you have an A2 student, yeah, the target will be B1. So that's the first thing you need to do. Okay, then you define what you are testing. This is what you call test construct. Once you've sought your target, you need to be defined what actually you are testing, depending on your course. So if you are a teacher at school, you look at your syllabus in particular, yeah, because the curriculum is at the higher level. Maybe you look at your syllabus as well as your scheme of work and the content of your textbook. Look at your textbook. Then you can ask yourself, what am I testing? Okay, and you specify clearly aspect of the language you intend to test. So are you testing reading comprehension, for example, at A2 level? Okay, what aspect of reading comprehension are you testing? That's very important as well. Yeah, and the kind of text. So if, for example, if your students are at B2 level, then one would expect, or university students as well, you can test a text which contains argument, yeah, okay, which contains argument, which contains information as well. But again, you must always check against the CFR. So if you look at CFR, as you go from A2 to C1, the text will change accordingly. So the input text is very important for reading comprehension, and the questions are also important. So the input text must be, if you are testing B1, must be at B1 level. And the questions must be also at B1, with a few questions perhaps at A2. Yeah, but you cannot have questions at B2, because you are doing single level. not multi-level testing like MUET or SPM. That's different. Okay, so you need to have an idea what are you testing actually. The third one is once you've done that, you've got the what you call the level. You have identified what you want to test. Then you identify appropriate task. The task, what we call assessment task. Yeah, and then what you need to do is that you need to identify the features that need to be taken into consideration in constructing the task. Like, for example, as I said just now, someone raised the issue of content. Yeah. So A2 level, the content must be familiar, concrete, everyday, something which you're familiar. Whereas C1, the content can be abstract, not that familiar, more specialized. You know what I'm trying to say? So all this have to be taken to, that is about input text. Yeah. And then the language, for example, in terms of, you look at turn taking, is there? Yeah. If you look at turn taking, what can if you do interaction, you're testing interaction or assessing interaction, what can a B1 do during interaction in terms of turn taking? So all this need to be put together. Yeah. So if you look at this one here, describe the specific content of test tasks in task packs. So what you need to do, once you've identified the level, once you've identified what you're testing, you need to come up, you need to come up with what we call the task specifications. The task specification describe the task that you're going to come up with. It's like this. If people describe you, how tall are you, the color of your skin, all sorts of things, your face, your facial features, your arm and all that. Whereas for testing, you have to know, number one is, now if you are testing, for example, reading, you need to know the input text. Yeah, that's one of the criteria. I don't have time for that. Next one, the questions. Are you going to ask, what kind of question are you going to ask? MCQ, yes, no question. Okay, so all these are very important for those who are going to set a test. These, remember, these are what we call assessment task. Yeah. Now, if you look at that, you describe the specific content of test task in task spec. So in task spec, I don't know whether I have the sample here, but I want to tell them, but the helm is at the moment with Cambridge English, with Cambridge actually being assessed, and two Elham documents already endorsed by Cambridge. I'm not going to show it yet, until we finally launch, then you can have Elham. Yes, I can't show it yet. But this specific content test and task specs. So you have a task specs, Elham has that, and then we specify the content. So for reading, you have to specify the content, the input text, and the questions, right? And then in terms of the content, is it familiar or not familiar? In terms of the language in there, the language, all right? So all this will be in task specs, right? And then the third, very importantly, you need to know how you're going to measure, how you're going to give marks for this, yeah? So identify the level, define the construct what you're testing, then come up with task specification, we describe the task, then you measure the aspects of language ability you are testing. Is that okay? Yeah. So all this. So one thing about the CFR help you to identify the level. The CFR will help you to define the test construct by using the descriptors. Yeah. And the CFR will help you to identify the appropriate task, because the descriptors tell you this task for me is appropriate for A2. So reading text for A2 is different from reading text from C1. Remember just now, longer text, complex subjects, whereas for A2 will be simple, short. Do you see what I mean? So that will be some of the criteria that you need to identify. All right. Now, measuring this aspect language ability. Now, if you look at this one there, to measure, you need to have the assessment criteria for the assessment of a particular spoken written. I'll give you written performance, because written or spoken you can see. You need to have criteria. I will show you afterwards. and you need to ensure that they reflect the knowledge and the ability being assessed. If it's a B1 knowledge, make sure that they are assessing B1. If a B2 student, make sure that they're assessing B2 knowledge as well, B2 ability. Right? Okay, here it is. This is just doing the same thing in form of a diagram. Right, now let us look at this one here. Okay, I don't have time for the but let me just show you this. Yeah, there you are. Descriptors. See, if you look at this, and this is communicative language ability, activity, yeah, for overall interaction. Okay, this is B2. This is formal discussion at B2. Yeah. Okay, and look at that. Yeah, you found this one just now, and you look at the level there. Can use all this, and I have make it red. You see, general, academic, vocational, leisure topics. Yeah, all this. This is very important. Interaction. Yeah, if you look at that one, and can highlight the personal significance of events and experiences and all that. You see, all these are keywords that you can use when you want to develop the task, right? So if you want to develop task, I cannot teach you how to do that because it's more of seminar. It's not workshop. That has to be a workshop. But for seminar, it's more of giving you information what you need to do and for you to access. Yeah. So they are very long because of the descriptors. Let me just, this is what. So this is very important. This is what you need to know. Yeah. When I have the Elham, we will show you exactly. So if, for example, you have the task setting parameter, this is when you set the task, you ask yourself the task purpose. What is the task purpose? And then the response format. So if it's a writing, is a writing an essay or a report? That's a response format. Knowledge of criteria. Okay, so what you mean by that is that what knowledge do you need to, what kind of knowledge do you have in order to do this task? Text length, okay, weighting, how much weight, text length, time constraint, 20 minutes, 30 minutes, 1 hour, writer-reader relationship, is it a friend? Is it, or they do not know each other at all? This is in terms of, okay, this is in terms of reading, writing, all right? And these are the task demand parameters. And this one you can get from communicative language competences, right? So these are the things. Remember, this talk is just for you to just have a feel, yeah, not detail, because 2 hours not possible to do this. Yeah? It's not possible. So I just want you to have the feel. More importantly, you don't have to do this unless you're a university teachers. For teachers at school, more importantly, for you to understand the descriptors. You don't have to do this. Yeah, and for you to come up with a checklist. I think the checklist is quite important when you are doing formative assessment. Yeah, formative assessment. And classroom usually classroom testing is one level, so it's much easier. Yeah, and it's guided by your syllabus and by your textbook. Okay, but we don't have time to, of course, come up with a task. It's not possible. Yeah, so that you have to bear in mind. And very importantly, also don't get confused by all these descriptors. All you need to understand is that is number one, that's teaching English is about developing their communicative ability. That's number one. Yeah. And what communicative ability is based on what level? From A1 to C1. Yeah. And you can look at the global scale descriptors to have an idea what your students are like. Yeah, whether they actually be one student, because sometimes you may have students put in a class, but you may have a mix of students, A2, B1 students, and you can say, oh, this group seems to be like B1, this somehow A2. You look at the global descriptors, right? If you want to be more detailed in looking at their reading comprehension, you go to overall reading comprehension descriptors. Yes. There are descriptors called overall reading comprehension. Just overall, not the not the specific one. That's more for university teachers. Yeah. Unless, of course, you want to find out. Or listening comprehension, overall listening comprehension descriptors. These are enough for you to have an idea about the performance of students and to have an idea how to set a task for formative assessment and for summative assessment. But summative assessment, I think, is a group test, isn't it right? I'm not sure how the teachers set the papers. Do you set the papers yourself or do you share with others to set the papers? And is a paper at one level? Because I don't go to school. So but at university, I know that you all set summative assessment at the end, as well as you have some assessment, some kind of assessment, continuous assessment. I think the seventh week, yeah. I think usually isn't it, midterm? Yeah, at the end of the first half of the term. The other one is at the end of the whole semester, which is in the 14th week. All right. So these are the things. I hope I can give you my slides, but not this one. I have to take out certain things, but these are mostly descriptors. More importantly is I think you have to reply to your question. Yeah. So this is just to conclude. A link to the slide can be built into each of the test. Yeah. Development process through specifying the test content. You use the CFR descriptors to specify the test content. You use the CFR level to target the level. Is it B1, A2, C1, and so on? Yeah. And then you use the communicative language competences. Yeah. Pragmatics, language, linguistics, and all that as criteria, assessment criteria. That's very important. Okay. Then, and of course, you need to interpret your students' performance and relate that to the real world ability. Yeah, if you see your student can do oral presentation, is it they can do it in real life or they can just do it in class with your help? Okay, so you must relate that. Does your test relate that? That's the next question you need to ask. Okay. Now I need to answer some of your questions, not all. Do you want me to answer your question? So these are the challenges. There's one question. I'm so sorry, so small. Because I think it's...
we have a few questions live here. I think we should take the live question.
Live question, why not? Live question, why not? Yeah. Yes, please.
All right. Please. Okay, so thank you, Prof. We'll go directly to the Q&A session. All right, so let's see. All right, we have, okay, so can we have our team post the questions? We'll start with from Mazlan, right? So Professor, which particular skill or skills should we prioritize for the pre-university students in terms of assessment, especially when we are faced with time constraint in teaching?
Okay. Now we can't say people will say that you should give all skills the same amount of attention. Yeah. So because you cannot. So, but if you don't have time, I think it's a productive skill. But what you need to do at university, particularly if you have the productive skill as is speaking, then you need to give them a secondary skills, yeah, listening as well as reading, because they need to read a lot in order to also be able to speak on a particular topic, especially university student. So, but your focus will be speaking, okay? But the input that you give, you need to provide input. So these are secondary skills. You need to provide the listening input so that they can listen and they respond. And you need to provide the reading input for them to have enough knowledge, content knowledge to be able to talk about something. Yeah, sometimes it's not just the language, it's just the knowledge that you don't have. And this can be, you can get quick knowledge through reading. So if you can do that in a class, that, you know, as part of your whole course, I think that's good. And writing, of course, yeah, as I said, productive people can see. Receptive skill you cannot see. You cannot, you know, it is more receptive. But the receptive skills are very important. Reception is very important, yeah, for you to be able to perform, speaking and writing. Yeah.
Prof. So basically,
Is that okay?
receptive and productive are both equally important, but to show the skill, of course, it's productive skills. Okay, Prof, we have our next question from Ms. Luciana Yassin. So she asked, Prof, how can we ensure that the topic selected for an essay question matches with our intended level of a test? For example, how to select suitable essay topics for argumentative essay to B2 students?
Okay. Right. So you need to when you look at reading comprehension, yeah, for B2. Sorry, reading comprehension CFR for B2. So most importantly for B2, the text, of course, one is that you need to select appropriate text for that level. It's very important in terms of the topic. The topic should be it should be more, for example, more related to students at university. Should be, what do you call that? You can have factual topics as well. You can have literary text. So the text must be more complex and longer, because remember, these students are going to C1. When you go to C2, B2, you are going to C1. C1, of course, will be very complex. So what you need to, my advice is look at the C1 descriptor and look at the B2. Depending whether your student, you are testing B2 low or B high. If you're testing B2 low, look at the B1 descriptor, or should go beyond that. Yeah, so to B2. So the B2 text should be longer than the B1 text. Okay, and it may not have, you may test question which test students' ability to infer, but may not be as much as C1 level. So if you look at C1 level, implication or implying, is very high up. Okay, so but we are talking about reading here, making inference. Okay, as a writer, it's different. From the reading problem, you may have question on inferencing sometimes, but more important, because these are argumentative, you need to show a text. This is reading, where there is a development of argument and how this argument is supported. Okay, so for argument text, it's best to choose more factual text, text with factors, say discussing certain phenomenon, whatever, or argue for or against, but make sure that the argument is well developed in terms of the structure of the argument. It has supporting details, it has explanation, and also very importantly is that the text must have coherent cohesion as well. So length is important, content is important, the topic is important, how the text is developed in terms of argument. So it must be an argumentative essay. It must be an argumentative text. You can't choose any other text because yours is specific to argument. And B2 also be determined the kind of question you ask. The kind of question you ask. So, and you must ask yourself, are you testing reading or are you testing reading and writing? So usually for reading, when you're testing reading, they use short answers or MCQ, usually MCQ. Because if you test like a summary, is it reading or is it writing or is it both? So that you have to take into consideration, not just reading, but writing. Okay, so does that answer your question? Yeah, so input text and questions. The response that you require from your student should be both B2. Okay, so but you need to go to volume, the companion volume, look at reading comprehension under argument. Reading for argument, I think. For information as well.
Okay, Prof. Our last question for today, since time is really running out, but we'll have to take this question. Yes, can this framework be applied to other varieties of English, such as North American English language teaching, from Maliza Isa?
No problem at all. The English doesn't affect the framework. It's just the framework can be applied to any language for that. For Arabic, for good question, French or Italian. So what language teaching does not affect the application of the framework. can use for any language or for any variety. No problem. Okay. Yes. Any question anymore?
Okay, I think we have one last one, Prof.
Okay, right.
Prof, what would your advice be for selecting authentic materials as reading texts for ESP courses? Most of the time, the texts are at C2 level, but target level for the course is B2. Thank you.
Okay, right. So if it's a B2 you're testing, this is reading, yeah? You're talking about reading, yeah? A reading text may contain a bit of C1 features. May. I don't say, yeah? Because remember, it's very difficult for it to say this is exact B2. So you may have, but not going to C1, C2 text, yeah? So what you need to, number one, you can identify what level this by using text inspector. I mean, they have been using text inspector to identify the text, to have an idea what the text is, what the text, particularly the vocabulary. If you go to Cambridge, I can't remember what, but you can look at the vocabulary used there. So vocabulary should be B2 level. There may be B1 vocabulary, yeah, but do not use a C2 text. You can't use that, because if you use a C2 text are very complex, and the subject matter is so complex, and the text is long. Not just that, C2 also requires you to go beyond that text to also bring other text. This is what we call intertextuality, where you go beyond that text to referring to other text. Yeah, B2 is not like that. So what you need to do is, it depends on whether you are testing B2 high or B2 low, where your students come from. Yeah. So if your student just finished a B1 course, so you're bringing your student from B1 to B2, as a C2 text out of the question. You need to choose a B2 text, and usually you don't choose texts which are too specialized. Yeah. Don't get it from engineering text. Yeah. Or journals. No, they can't. You can get from general text like this on technical topics. Okay. Yeah. Does that answer your question? But don't get technical text. Not from engineering. That's quite tough.
Okay, I think that's the last question on live today. About the questions that we have on the screen there, Prof, I think we'll have to have another session for this. It's just
yes, I'm so sorry, because there's a lot of things to cover.
Yes.
Yeah. But as I said, remember the Cefr descriptors. That's very important. So if you have a next time, then we can focus just on the CFR, how you use CFR to come up with a task. Then that means you all have gone through this. Easier for us to go straight to the one which I think I have a lot more to say. We don't have the time, fortunately. No worries.
Okay, Prof. Any last advice for all of us today?
Yeah. Take it as an experience. As I said, all of us started with not knowing the CFR. All of us started without knowing the CFR. I don't even know what the CFR was when I was asked to do the roadmap. But it takes a bit of time. But I think more importantly, if you look at the CFR as a framework of reference for you to refer to, for something that can help you to come up with a course content as well as a test content or assessment content for your assessment. It's kind of a reference, yeah. But we are not controlled by it. It's just a reference. But what is more important is how you use a CFR, yeah. How do you CFR to ensure that you actually can help the students achieve the ability to communicate at that level. So if your students are at B1 level or A1 level, you must understand enough so that you can help your student achieve the ability for them to communicate at A1 level. What can A1 do? When to speak, to read, yeah? What can they do? What ability do you need to have in order for them to be able to be A1 student? being able to read, speak, write, and listen. The same way you go up, A2 student can, B1 student, B2. That's very important. And I think that knowledge that you have, especially teachers, because you are in a classroom. Like me, I'm more of planning and all that, and come up with, tell people what they need to put in there. Okay, with content, but you actually implement the classroom. It is very important for you to go from having the knowledge to using this knowledge to perform in the classroom. And more importantly is to help your students develop that ability. It all comes from you. Yeah, it all comes from you. Yeah, so that's very important. And that's why it's very important for you to see the CFR and understand what ability does student need to have in order to perform at that level in terms of reading, speaking, writing, listening, and interaction. Is that okay? Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Okay,
I
Prof,
see you
thank you so much. Subhanallah. Okay,
No.
Prof, I'd like to say thank you. So many insights that we have today. Alhamdulillah. So ladies and gentlemen, please allow me to say thank you and express our gratitude to Professor Dr. Zuraida Muhammad Dawn. So today's session is actually CFR's based assessment in English language education issues and challenges. But Prof, you have gone beyond. It's not only about issues and challenges, but how to cater in detail of us at the university in developing assessments and whatnot. So, subhanallah, thank you so much, Prof. It really shows how much dedication you have towards CFR-based assessment in Malaysia. So with that, thank you to you, Prof. And thank you to all participants today, especially all who have commented and asked wonderful questions, which has made this session much more fruitful as it is, subhanallah. Okay, so with that, we'll end our session and hopefully we have more sessions in the future. So with that, I'd like to say thank you. Thank you again, Professor. And
thank you all. Thank you for attending and for a good chair, for being a good chair.
Thank you, Prof. Okay, that's Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam. Bye. Bye all. I see you again. Okay, bye.
Strong.